So, welcome viewers, and thank you for joining us for the second installment of our four-part series entitled Future-Proofing the Graduate Professional. Of course, PPS is all about graduate professionals. We're the largest mutual insurer in South Africa, and we exist solely to serve our professional members, who, unlike clients of other insurers, are actually the owners of our business, and they share in our profits. My name is Marlons Question, and I am head of PPS Specialist Support Services. So PPS Specialist Support Services provides technical advice and financial planning support to our intermediaries and to our members. Our session today is entitled Small Business, Big Risk. We're going to start with the session by exploring the concept of risk as it exists in a business concept. We'll be identifying a few key risks that are common to all industries. And then we'll present a framework for analyzing them. Lastly, we'll delve into a topic, something that's quite topical today, and this is the whole question of business continuity planning, where we'll be discussing 6 key considerations that are essential in the design of a good business continuity plan. Our session is scheduled for an hour. We'll be using the first 40 minutes to get through our content. Thereafter, the remaining 20 we will use to answer all of your questions. All microphones have been switched off other than those of the presenters. So please use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen to fire off questions at any time. However, please note that those questions will only be addressed during the allocated slot. So lastly, we're going to keep the session quite lively and interactive. We'll be running a few special offers, and also throughout the session, we'll be running a couple of polls. Please participate. So joining me today and representing PPS Group, we have Tiffany Ann Bush, and we also have Tracy Linnell. Ladies, please introduce yourselves to our viewers, starting with you, Tracy.
Thanks, Marlon. Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Linnell. I'm one of the directors of Morgan Solis. We are a specialist business continuity, crisis management, and disaster recovery company. I've been in business continuity for 20 years, obviously been very busy over the last couple of weeks and months dealing with all the issues that are happening in the industry, but very excited to share some insights with the members today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Tiffany, I think we've lost you. Apologies, members. We seem to be having a technical problem with Tiffany's microphone. We'll be with you shortly. Tiffany, please, on the top left-hand side of your screen, please find the microphone icon. It should be light blue. It's on. Apologies, members. I'm trying to work out what exactly has gone down. I have no sound.
So, Marlon, I'm able to hear you, and I think the members can hear you. I see Tiffany's just dropped off the.
I see she has.
Probably just to see if she can sort out her sound issue. Should we wait? Should we jump to my content around business continuity, and we can come back to Tiffany's?
I think perhaps we should. So I'm sure. I mean, Tracy, Tiffany shouldn't take too long.
Okay, we'll wait a sec.
Okay, let's give her a minute or two. Apologies, viewers. We've Of course, we've been for the better part of this morning and the whole of last night. The system worked completely fine.
Perfectly.
Could be that Tiffany's suffering from some bandwidth issues. You're back, Tiffany.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Excellent.
Oh my gosh.
Us.
Okay.
So before we get to Tiffany, thank you, ladies, for both joining us, and I think we've kept our viewers in suspense for long enough. Especially you, Tiffany. I know that you've been quite keenly following our webinar series, just wanting to understand exactly how we are spending your members' money. So I think let's get right into it, and let's start off with answering the question to what exactly is risk as it exists in a business context.
Thanks, Marlon. Basically, a business risk is any event or circumstance that's going to prevent you from achieving your business objectives. It could also potentially impact the sustainability of your business. In general, one wouldn't want to start doing risk planning in the middle of a crisis. And for those companies and businesses who have spent some time planning around emerging risks and how they would respond, they could potentially find themselves in a better space now when the risks actually become real events. But if you haven't done any risk planning until now, the old phrase of better late than never most certainly would apply. And to make those of you in the second category feel a little bit better, I would expect that even companies who have very advanced risk management strategies may not have had a global pandemic appropriately rated on their risk register. Certainly not to the extent that we're seeing the impact of COVID-19 globally. So before we get into the detail of some of the specific risks that small businesses are facing, let's discuss some key principles about how the risk management process works and why we should spend time on this. Risk management is a key business tool to try and assess against certain what-if questions that you need to ask your business. If you ask the question, what if the situation had to happen? You check how would the business be impacted? You'd probably assess this on a scale of minimal impact to significant impact, and that's illustrated on the vertical scale in the attached matrix. You would then assess how likely it is that this could happen. This would be assessed on the horizontal scale, from a remote to certain scale. You would then plot these based on these assessments. Once you have these impact and likelihood parameters understood, you then need to decide what you would do to either prevent it happening or how you would react if it did happen. In other words, your ability or readiness to respond. And for the ones that are either high impact or high likelihood, or even both assessments being high, that top right-hand corner of the matrix, you would need to assess these first and make sure that your mitigating actions are going to be effective, because those are the risks that are going to put your business under the most pressure. There are really only three options you have when deciding how to deal with the risk you're facing. Which of these options you end up selecting will depend on your risk appetite. And this basically means the level of risk that you're willing to accept in order for your business to achieve its goals. These options are, firstly, you choose to accept the risk and you just let it happen. Secondly, you can deal with the risk and take appropriate action to either avoid or survive it. And thirdly, you could transfer the risk to a third party, most traditionally through insurance. Now let's have a look at the more common risks that small businesses face and potentially what can be done about them. Now, these risks may already be affecting you, or they may still be coming at you down the road. At the moment, it probably feels like there's so much going on and so many issues to deal with that you're not certain where to start. And these risk management principles may help to give you the required structure to ensure that you're focusing on what is important for your business. The first principle is to identify that we are in a crisis and therefore need to adapt how we would normally respond to things. In the ordinary course of events, we'd potentially have time to react and plan and consider our various options. At this stage, we have none of those luxuries. We need to be having honest conversations within our businesses about the state of affairs so that the real solutions can be developed. We know that we're in very uncharted territory and that the future looks to be terribly uncertain. But that doesn't mean you can't start planning around what you would do for now, during the crisis, as well as for when things start to settle down, post the crisis. Marlon, let's look at the top 5 risks that we'll be facing within the COVID-19 context. Cash flow is probably one of the biggest risks for small businesses. We currently have a situation where the uncertainty around the future and what the economic environment will be is very difficult to predict. Many businesses are either not able to trade or have experienced significant reductions in revenue as a result of the lockdown. Your first priority is to know your numbers, get a good understanding of exactly what the financial position is, and potentially how it could change in the future. There's nothing to be gained from pretending that this isn't happening or from hoping that it would just get better on its own. You need this information to enable yourself to make informed decisions. Many businesses may feel paralyzed by inaction due to the fact that decisions actually need to be made without all the required information at hand. You should take control of the financial situation that your business is in. If you haven't already, eliminate all unnecessary expenditure. Double-check every line item of cost and see where that can be avoided or reduced. Be brave. If you need assistance, ask for it. Many banks are offering forms of debt relief. Have discussions with your creditors around potential extensions on payment terms where possible. And make use of government relief schemes and the SARS deferred payment options. We do not know how long this situation is going to last. We do know that it will eventually stabilize and then recover. But that is dependent on many uncertain factors, from locally, how the public health system responds, to globally, how countries begin to open up again. We need to be realistic. We need to do whatever it takes to ensure that the business survives this crisis. Whilst it may not be possible at this time, as soon as you are able, make sure that you try and set up contingency cash reserves that would cover somewhere between 3 and 6 months of your monthly expenditure. These cash reserves can then be called on in times of emergency. For those businesses that have already done this and have made use of these reserves during this time, don't forget to build them up again.
Thanks, Tiffy. You know, in business, there's an old saying, and it says that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash in the bank is reality. And this is surely ringing true for most of our South African businesses today as we struggle to survive under the lockdown restrictions. So I think the next question should be around, how do you amass these reserves? What are the vehicles that are available? And there are many. I mean, our viewers, your options are vast. So I think the first and probably the simplest would be to just amass those cash reserves in your current account. I think the big advantage of the current account is it's 100% liquid. You've got instant access to the funds. The downside, of course, is it offers you no interest. So we're having a situation where your money is in actual fact not working for you. There are options where your money can work for you, and these include bank money market accounts and also the type of unitized type money market accounts that we find in investment companies and also cash management accounts. So these vehicles generally offer returns in excess of what you would find in a normal sort of bank money market account. At PPS, we have a solution called the Enhanced Yield Fund. And this particular fund is quite safe. It invests only in interest-bearing assets. So these are things such as cash and bonds. And investors could expect returns of somewhere in the region of about 7%, not 17, no, especially not under these conditions, 7% over the medium term. That is, of course, before cost and tax. Then, of course, you also have other options that are not as liquid, options such as fixed deposits or notice deposits. These investment vehicles will generally provide higher returns without any cost. But of course, the downside is they're illiquid. And there's a strong possibility that if you access your funds prematurely, before the investment horizon has run its course, that you could be penalized. So it's critical, viewers, I think, that before you make decisions around where to invest your reserves, that you speak to an accredited financial advisor or broker. Investments can be quite tricky. So I think at this point in time, I think we need to go to our first poll, Tiffany and viewers. And in this particular instance, we want to know that, do you and your business have sufficient cash reserves? Cash reserves that could last you 6 months in case of an emergency. Viewers, so please see the control panel on the right-hand side. You may complete it within the next few minutes. So, Tiffany, we've covered one of your risks. What is the next risk?
Thanks, Marlon. There's significant volume of new rules and regulations around how to legally operate in the current environment, continue to evolve and be revised as we progress through the various stages of this crisis. These have become even more complex under level 4 and ultimately will be amended further when we reach higher levels of the lockdown, where businesses are beginning to resume trading. Make sure that you've found an official source for understanding your legislative obligations. You do not want to fall trap to fake news and get into trouble as a result. The last thing your business needs is to have a setback of additional spend in terms of fines, or even worse, being temporarily closed down because of non-compliance. For example, do you know what to do if one of your employees tests positive for COVID-19 in the workplace? Getting familiar with legislative requirements prior to these events occurring will mean that you can manage it more easily when they do happen. Unfortunately, we know that even though we are experiencing a crisis, certain people are using the chaos of the current situation to take advantage. We currently have one of the largest ever work from home situations. As a result, companies' cybersecurity measures are likely to be stretched to an unprecedented level. From a regulatory perspective, small businesses have just as much responsibility to manage data security and to avoid data breaches as larger businesses do. This should certainly form a key feature within your disaster recovery planning. In addition, with most employees working remotely, there could be more phishing or social engineering fraud attempts, as people may be less familiar with processes in their home environment compared to when they are in the office. It's therefore very important to ensure that your financial and your security controls are maintained as tightly as possible in the current conditions. Simple measures, regular software updates, or increasing cybersecurity awareness among employees, perhaps by communicating more regularly, will certainly help to combat this. Our next risk is around...
Tiffany, sorry, so just before you get to our next risk, just an update on the polls. It's interesting to see, and the one that I find fascinating, is that our audience, just about half of them, some in the region of about 49 to 50% of them, say yes, everything's in order. While just under 40%, and this is a scary statistic, are saying that they won't survive. Of course, our third option are people that are not sure and they need help. Currently, that option is sitting at 12%, 11%, 12%. So yes, guys, I mean, those of you that haven't voted yet, please get stuck in shortly. We will be launching our second poll. Back to you now, Tiffany.
Thanks, Marlon. Our next risk is around key people and the dependents. And in small businesses, there's a likely dependence on even fewer individuals, without whom the business is probably not able to operate. In larger businesses, you could probably cover this through succession planning or cross-skilling of individuals to act as emergency backups. Also, strong documentation of key processes would assist. However, in small businesses, the very financial security of the business may come down to these individuals. One could look at using risk transfer mechanisms to cover this, such as key person insurance. At this time, specifically when there's a health crisis impacting individuals' ability to work, this dependence becomes even more evident and therefore the risk even greater.
You know, viewers, I must agree with Tiffany. I think your business is so much more than just bricks and mortar. The business is not just about a corporate identity and a brand and products and even its services. More than anything, it's actually a structure consisting of people that have been organized in order to reach, not only from the perspective of losing employees or owners due to ill health, infirmity, sickness, death, whatever the case may be, but there's also a real risk that they could leave to join competitors. So we're going to be touching on business assurance a bit more later on. Tiffany, you mentioned 5 key risks.
But there are learnings nevertheless, and therefore provide opportunities for us to make changes to the business that may not have otherwise been evident from a business as usual environment. We need to take note of where we've identified vulnerabilities and make plans to address these in the future. Perhaps we will emerge with a deeper understanding of our customers' true needs, our suppliers' potential limitations, and our employees' ability to adapt to change better than we might have expected. We need to use these learnings to our advantage to shape the future for our businesses.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tiffany. Viewers, I think the risks that you encounter or which are encountered by a business It's inherently linked to the type of industry that you're in or that you find yourself in. And of course, there's lots more. Business interruption risk, which I'll cover a bit later, for example, are one of those. Then there's also things such as the loss of intellectual property and reputational risks that are both significant in terms of our professional practices. Guys, we're conscious of time, so we just before we turn to our next speaker, we're just about to end our first poll, and we're going to quickly take a look at the results. So the question is, do you have sufficient cash reserves specifically to last you 3 to 6 months? Just over half of our audience, which is fantastic, says 54% says yes, everything is in order. 11% say they're not sure, they need somebody to help them, down to 10%. And the last option, no, my business would not survive, 34% of our viewers, which is scary. So if we look at the two collectively, the second and the third option, 44% of our viewers are saying that they're either uncertain or their businesses will not survive another catastrophe where there's no income for 3 to 6 months. Thanks, guys. We're going to end that poll right now. And I'm going to move to my second speaker. And Tracy, welcome back. Tiffany's just outlined some key business risks. She's also highlighted the techniques that we can use to rate and manage them via her risk matrix. But what do we do when it all goes wrong? When a premises goes up in flames, or we're faced with some sort of natural or man-made disaster, can we actually plan for events like these?
So absolutely, Marlon. I mean, that is the crux of business continuity planning. The whole concept behind business continuity is actually to ensure that if you have a major interruption as a result of a fire or that we are able to resume operations within a predefined time so that we can continue to service our customers and our stakeholders. So one of the questions we were continuously asked is, why do we do this business continuity thing? And if you have a look at the slide that we put in front, in essence, most organizations, and let's be honest, just about every organization, is in business to make money, either for the stakeholders, etc. Now, in order to make that money, we need to have customers that are purchasing either a product or a service. We have an interruption to that product or service, as you mentioned, could be a result of fires, floods, even this COVID-19 situation. What potentially could happen is that the customer could decide to move to a competitor, to change brands, or to stop buying. And I like to use an example that comes from 2010. For those of you that even remember the BlackBerry handheld devices, in 2010, BlackBerry had a major outage in their IT network, and they were unfortunately down for 4 days in a row. Now, in 2010, you weren't cool unless you actually had a BlackBerry because it was your instant messaging and your email all on one device. And because they were down for so long, what happened as end consumers, we moved across to iPhones, to Samsungs, and to different devices. So the knock-on impact to BlackBerry as an organization is it almost crippled them, had massive impact on their revenues. And unfortunately, the knock-on and downstream impact is actually down to the average staff member in terms of potential job losses, salary cuts, and no bonuses. So very much on the right-hand side of the picture, you'll see we put business continuity in place ahead of an incident to ensure that we can resume the delivery of that product or service to the potential customer or to the customer. So when we look at business continuity, we need to look at what is it we want to protect. And we basically look at it from 6 pillars, and I'm going to take you through what those are now. The first one, which we've all had exposure to in the last couple of months, is around premises. So this is where we have the situation where you do not have access to your primary site or your primary premises. It could be as a result of, fire, flood, protests, lockdown marches. And what we're really going through now with COVID-19 is certainly in stage 5, where we couldn't get access to the buildings as a result of government regulations. So the question you've got to ask yourself is, if my primary premises are not available, where am I going to operate from? Where are my staff going to operate from? Now, we were very quickly thrust into that space. And a lot of organizations have put together remote working capability, obviously work from home capability. But some of the other options you could have a look at is having a reciprocal agreement with another organization. Most of you will probably be familiar with the Regis type businesses or workspaces, where you can then move to an alternate premises to ensure you can continue operating. So that's premises. The second one we look at that is absolutely crucial is around skill set. So this is fundamentally the people that are working in our organization that are delivering our products and services to our customers. Now, if there may be various instances where we have a loss of skill sets, it could be people get involved in a protest march, we have illness, and like we're seeing with COVID-19, and thankfully the stats are quite low at the moment, we have the potential for loss and actually death of staff members. And the question we've got to look at, particularly in small and medium businesses, is if we lose that skill set, how are we going to replace them? And how are we going to continue to operate? So Tiffany alluded to it during her talk. She spoke about cross-skilling, succession planning, and also ensuring we have standard operating procedures in place. There are a couple of other things that you could also look at as solutions, things like outsourcing to a third-party provider, or even a situation where you could recruit ex-employees who are retired and still have a skill set to assist you. So this really is an important pillar.
Tracy, I must agree. I think replacing lost skill sets is probably one of the most challenging, if not the most challenging, of all your business continuity pillars. How do you guys deal with this risk in your own practice?
Sure, that's a good question and a very important one. So just to give some context to the viewers, our consulting firm is 10 people strong, of which we have 2 directors, myself and my partner. I look after the sales and operations side of it, and my partner is on the technical IT side. So what we've done on his side is we've put all the succession planning in place, cross-skilling, we're good to go on that side. But because my skill set is a little diverse, we are in the process of upskilling someone, but we've recognized that we do at the moment have an exposure in that space. So what we've done is we've turned to insurance as a mitigation strategy, where we've taken out 2 types of insurance policies. The first one is a key man insurance policy, which is basically saying if either myself or my partner are injured or anything, we have insurance to cover us. And the second type that we've taken out is what's known as a buy and sell agreement. So if either of us decide to exit the business, we can purchase each other's shares in the business. So it's a great question.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Tiffany. So I think from a long-term insurance and risk perspective, specifically with regards to business planning, Tiffany made reference to risk transfer. This is what we're talking about. So there's a number of triggers that we look at. And those triggers, the primary impact is initially felt with the owner. It moves on, it then starts impacting his estate, and invariably it will impact the business, the remaining owners, and of course, eventually the employees. So some of these triggers could be things such as death, of course, divorce. Divorce is a big one. Sequestration, you could be a victim of crime. Of course, all of these things eventually will have an impact downstream, all the way down to the employees. Now, guys, we're just about to launch a second poll. And of course, the second poll, what we want to know is, in the event of your partner's death, do you know what will happen to your business? And of course, the first option is, yes, I have a plan in place. In other words, I've got some kind of succession going. The business will continue. It will not die with me. And the second is, no, I need help with putting a plan together. So what is business assurance? Business assurance, for intents and purposes, it's a risk policy. It's a policy of insurance. And it's designed to protect the business and owners against the financial impact of death, ill health, or infirmity. Not just the owners, but of key people as well. So, I mean, typically we'd cover the owners. It could be a director like you, Tracy, or it could be a key person. It could be a member of staff. It could be anybody. The solutions that we structure would normally be one of, or a combination of the following. So this is typically would include buy and sell, or what we call buy and sell agreements. key person cover, contingent liability, and then lastly, credit loan cover. So for our purposes, we're just going to focus on two. The first of which, of course, is what we call key person cover. So what is key person cover? Key person cover is what we call a company-owned policy, meaning the company pays the premium and is awarded the proceeds. So how do we use it? I mean, for all intents and purposes, the policy is designed to protect the company against the financial impact of losing a key employee. So typically, this would be somebody who's got rare or specialist skills. It's an employee that the business would also struggle to replace. Someone that makes a significant contribution to the company's bottom line and can be insured. This could be a sales director, or it could be some kind of top specialist that brings in a disproportionately high percentage of your revenue. Then, of course, there's also the exists risk to the owners. So we provide protection for the owners of a business through what we call buy and sell agreements. And this is quite important. This is not a company-owned policy. These are policies that are actually owned by the owners. And what they serve to do via a legal contract is to make it obligatory on the death or ill health or disability of one of the owners for the remaining owners to purchase the company interest. And this is important. This is very important. At a specific price. So we protect the deceased, let's call it the deceased estate, and we protect the remaining owners by bringing by ensuring that the price you pay is going to be reflective of the actual value of the business. So that this entire agreement, of course, it's a contract. What makes it very cost effective is the fact that it is financed through insurance. And with insurance, of course, we are able to pump in the liquidity that is needed in order for the remaining owners to buy the interest. So quickly before we move on, Tracy, let's just have a look at our poll results. So up until now, we've asked the question, in the event of your partner's death, do you know what will happen to your business? I am very pleased to announce that over 90% of our audience, 90%, that's fantastic, says yes, they have a plan in place, succession is in place, the business will continue, it will not die with me. Then there is 9% though, which are saying no, they need help. And of course, we're here to help. So audience, before we move on to the next part of our presentation, on the right-hand side, at the control panel, you'll see a little icon called Office. For those of you that want to speak to an accredited advisor or broker, and if you have your own, that's also fine. Please click on the link provided, and of course, it takes us to our PPS Business Assurance page. So, Tracy, up until now, we've covered 2 of the 6 pillars. You started off by highlighting the importance of having a plan to relocate your premises. We then moved to key or sort of core skill sets and how to create resilience and to protect those. What is the next pillar?
Absolutely, thanks, Marlon. So the next pillar that we look at is equipment. Now, obviously in the financial services industry, this could take the form of your desktops, your laptops, your bank tokens. But for a number of your members out there, if you're a dentist, an optometrist, you've got very specific equipment that actually helps you to deliver that product or service to your customer. So the question we want to ask here is, how will you replace that critical equipment if for some reason it is damaged in a flood, in a fire, or some sort of cyber attack? And Tiffany alluded to it. We're seeing a big uptake in cyber attack. And you may say, well, why on equipment? If you see the example of the dryer in the picture there, what's happening is cyber attackers are actually now targeting what we call operational technology, which is the manufacturing equipment, and then they're actually manipulating it. So really important that you analyze your business and you understand what the critical equipment is and how you're going to replace it. So it could be things like you're going to purchase equipment post-incident. It could be that you could outsource the responsibility of that equipment to another organization, or it could be that you have spares in stock. So please have a look at that and see how you would actually deal with the loss of critical equipment in your business. The next one we look at is documentation. And what we're looking at here is actually physical hard copy documentation. So when we engage with clients and customers, we typically come across desks in pieces of paper, I'm not too worried about those. It's the actual ones where we have a key dependency on them, things like HR employee records, single-signed SLAs, they could be legal agreements. Those sort of documents need to be scanned in and made available in a soft copy format. Now, we've seen quite a lot of this during COVID-19, where staff members are not able to access the original premises and actually get to those physical pieces of documentation that they needed. So really important to have a look, identify those critical pieces of documentation, and possibly as soon as you can, if you are exposed, get in, get those scanned, and put them into some sort of digital format. So that's really looking at equipment. At documentation. The next one we look at is suppliers. And what we're referring to as suppliers here is most of you inside your business will have a key dependency on third parties, vendors, suppliers who provide you with equipment, with stock, with services. Now, the question we ask is, well, what happens if something occurs to those suppliers? Let's say for some reason they have a protest march and their trucks aren't running, or they themselves have a flood or a fire or a disaster on their premises, and their service actually stops to you as an organization. We need to understand what are we going to do and how are we going to replace those suppliers. So it could be things like you multi-source. In other words, you're purchasing from 2 different suppliers. It could be that you could source a supplier post the event, or in the situation where you absolutely have a critical dependency on that supplier. What we often recommend is that in your SLA agreements with those vendors or suppliers, you actually inject business continuity clauses that says that that supplier must be able to continue to service you as an organization. So, Marlon, I mean, we were chatting a little bit earlier about, how has PPS handled the situation during COVID-19, and I thought it would be valuable for you to share some of the insights we were talking about earlier.
No, absolutely, Tracy, I agree. But I think before we get there, I'm just following our chat function on the right-hand side. And we're either doing an exceptional job and we're answering everybody's questions, or our audience is completely disinterested. So please, viewers, members, feel free to fire off your questions. We're going to be addressing them within the next few minutes. So yes, Tracy, you're right. And it's something that we certainly experience, the need or the importance of having a BCP plan upstream. So I think the most pertinent or the most recent incident involved the announcement of lockdown restrictions. So of course, as you can imagine, us like most other firms, we have hundreds of employees that are based in offices, people that generally use desktops to do their work. And now, of course, we've got this lockdown thing coming. A lot of them have core functions that they need to fulfill, but these core functions are not necessarily categorized as essential services by government. So now we're sitting with a situation we literally need to source hundreds of laptops, and laptops are in short supply. Fortunately, our executive, of which Tiffany is part of, and our COVID-19 command team, they instituted our business continuity plan. And literally within a week, just over a week, 2 weeks, we had all the laptops we needed. We had all the 3G cards we needed. And of course, those staff were now able to fulfill their roles from home. And I think that laptop situation presented a real threat to our business, in that we would not have been able to run a lot of our core processes without it. So on the subject of hardware and connectivity, please talk to us a bit about IT and data.
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, as we understand and the way in which we're operating right now, IT and data is absolutely crucial to our ability to operate. When we talk about it in the context of business continuity, it's about ensuring that if we have an outage to our IT applications, or we have any loss of data, that we've actually put mitigations and disaster recovery planning in place to ensure that we can resume those operations, possibly at an alternate data center, and even restoring the data that we've potentially lost. Now, we've had situations where people say to us, but this is never going to happen. Now we've got 2 major clients that in the last year, unfortunately, have both had issues in their data center environments where they had air cons that leaked. And what happened was it caused a spark and a fire, and the data centers were actually rendered inaccessible. And so these things do actually happen, and it's for these type of situations that we need to put plans in place that we've tested our disaster recovery and can actually resume those IT applications and data. And something that we've seen quite a bit of, and it's not actually just applicable to this pillar, but to all the pillars, is the use of business interruption insurance to actually cover that initial damage, and insurance around the loss of impact.
Absolutely, Tracy. I think that the loss of equipment is something more critical, like the loss of a premises, could not only have a big impact on your operations, but I think financially the impact is huge. Unfortunately, in commercial insurance, most policies will offer what we call business interruption cover. And of course, business interruption cover is not only geared towards insulating you or providing compensation against the direct loss incurred by the insured event. It also looks at consequential loss. So in other words, you can apply for cover that would include one of the following. So this includes cover to replace your fixed costs. So in other words, those expenses that you would have incurred, independently of whether or not the actual insured event happened. Then, of course, you can also apply for cover to protect you or at least make provision for your net profit. And this, of course, is the net profit that you would have earned if the insured event didn't occur. And then lastly, any other additional cost you can also apply for. So cost that you're incurring specifically to speed up the business recovery process can also be applied for. So viewers, I think we're drawing very quickly to the end of our session. And before we get to our Q&A session, Tracy, would you please remind our viewers of what those 6 pillars are?
Absolutely, Marlon. And maybe just to wrap up on the business interruption insurance, when we deal with a lot of clients, it's one of the questions that we ask, do you have it in place? And oftentimes when we interrogate it a bit deeper, we find that there are components that they didn't think about, like, am I covered for data loss? Am I covered if the building next door to me burns down? So it really is important to engage with an expert who understands business interruption insurance and get a really comprehensive solution in place. So wrapping up our conversation, really important from a business continuity point of view that you have a look at the 6 pillars inside your organization, ensure that you put in solutions in place. So just to repeat them, make sure that you take care of your skill sets, your premises, your documentation, your equipment, your third parties, and obviously your IT systems. And that really wraps up the conversation today.
Okay, awesome. Thank you both, Tiffany and Tracy, and thank you, viewers, for spending the time and listening to us. Before we move to questions, I just want to have a quick look at the poll before we end it. There's been some slight movement in that regard. So viewers who've answered yes, they have a plan in place, the business will not die with them, represents 89% of our audience, which is fantastic. Then, of course, those who answered no, I need help with putting a plan together, they are currently standing at 10%. And if you assume we've had about 170, 180, there's close to 18, 19 people that need help. So guys, we've gone just over the 40-minute mark. We're going to switch to your questions now. And as I switch to your questions, I'm going to pop up our contact details, both PPS Specialist Support Services. Please make use of it. If you don't have an advisor or broker and you want to reach out to us directly, you may. Alternatively, those of you that have advisors or brokers, please contact them and they'll set up a virtual consultation. I've also included Tracy's contact details, so should you have questions or concerns around your own business continuity planning and disaster recovery strategies, please reach out to her. I'm going to turn to questions. I've seen the first question is, I've got a question that wants to know, where somebody wants to know. I've just lost the question. I see there's comments around my chair that needs greasing and oiling. I super agree. Fortunately, I have Tiffany online, and I'm sure she could ensure that the purchase order is written at. Deepak Nagar wants to know, will the slides be available to participants? Absolutely. So Mail & Guardian will make it available. There's also going to be a recording after the session and a summary. We'll be sending you an email with a summary of the session, and of course there will also be links on the Mail & Guardian site where you can access the content. I see there's lots of advisors and brokerages online. It's fantastic to know that our representatives are well represented. Here's another question, and I think I should probably take this one, ladies. So Moghasandram wants to know, how does a buy and sell agreement pay on an exit of a partner, not on death or disability. So specifically, the type of to answer your question, Sandram, the agreements that we are involved in typically would look at events such as death, ill health, or infirmity. And I think it's critical to understand that this policy exists to provide the liquidity that you need. That at the drop of a hat, if an insured event happens, of course you have the necessary income that you need, or at least you need to have the necessary capital that you need to purchase an owner's interest. In the event that you want to buy at an owner for any other event, then of course you will have to rely on your cash reserves. So this is funds that you've accumulated in your own rights. And I think this is the main reason why products such as buy and sell policies have become so popular, because you don't need to reach out into your own pocket to buy at the interest. If the event is linked to death, ill health, infirmity, or some kind of risk event, the insurance policy takes it and makes sure that, of course, those funds are available. Sandram, I hope I answered your question. Ladies, are we seeing any other questions? I'm just going through the list.
Marlon, so I see there's one from Anton Potgieter.
Yeah.
He's asked, he said, insurance could be costly. Do you have a benchmark of the percentage of turnover that one could spend on insurance?
I think it's difficult to sort of put a peg in the ground, because there's so many different variables. So I mean, the price that you pay when it comes to insurance is linked to a number of things. For one, the individual risk that you represent to the insurance company determines the cost of your premium. So these are events such as, or these are or things such as your age. Of course, generally older people pay higher premiums, younger people less premiums. Something that we've mastered in PPS is managing our risk pool, because we only serve professionals exclusively. That's all we do. What you'll find is that our premiums are super competitive. In actual fact, you'll find that more often than not, we come at slightly cheaper than our next biggest competitor. But I mean, to answer your question, Anton, it's difficult to put a peg in the ground. There's a lot of variables at stake. The type of industry that you're going to have is definitely going to be a determining factor. Your age, your qualifications, even your income impacts the premium that you pay for your life insurance. And I'll give you a typical example, such as PI cover. So we've got a medical insurance product specifically geared towards providing professional indemnity cover for doctors. Let's use the example of gynecologists. The premiums that gynecologists have to pay for their PI cover, it is just monumental. It is astronomical. And this is largely due to the high incidence of litigation that the industry is experiencing, where patients are, of course, instituting some kind of legal action against a gynecologist. I know instances where gynaes are paying up to R1 million a year on their professional indemnity insurance. And for them, it's a good deal, because if you compare it to the alternative, they really do not have a choice. So it's Anton, it's a very difficult question to answer.
Marlon, if I can jump in, just from my own personal perspective, obviously owning our own business, our decision around taking out, key man dependency and buy and sell agreements was very much around our own personal risk appetite and our ability to sleep well at night. So we looked at it from a cost benefit perspective and our risk appetite, and obviously for us it was a no-brainer that we needed to do it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Tracy. I'm just paging through our questions again. And
can I pick up on one that I saw a little bit earlier?
Please go ahead, Tracy.
Okay. There was a question that said, is there a difference between short-term insurance and business continuity planning? So I hope I can pick this one up and answer it. So, business continuity planning is not just about having money available to respond to something when we've had an incident. Your short-term insurance is there as a policy to pay out after a period of time for a certain amount of income, or the value of the money that you get in your hands as a result. policy in place. But a business continuity program is actually about making sure that when we look at those 6 pillars that I spoke about, you put the solutions in place ahead of time so that when we actually have an incident, you're much quicker able to respond, you keep your customers happy, and there's less likelihood of actually needing access to that full amount in your insurance policy because you're actually mitigating the risk before it occurs. So that was just insight into that one.
Absolutely, I have to agree, Tracy. So I think you have to divorce the plan from the actual instrument that you're going to use to transfer that risk. So much the same. I mean, next week we're going to have a fantastic session, and the session specifically is going to cover holistic financial planning. So in this particular session, we're gonna view our audience, our membership as complete people, and with that, there's competing demands on your finances, your goals, your needs, whatever the case may be, and limited resources. So the plan in itself is just a blueprint. The strategies that you follow to mitigate or reduce risk is completely different. It's something else. It's basically now you're in solution mode. So absolutely, Tracy, I have to agree. So I've seen an interesting question from Franz Kraus, and I know this is a hot one. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
It's something that is popping up all the time, specifically fired at us from our supporting intermediaries. And Franz Kraus wants to know, is profit share applicable to key man policies? They're going to give you the short answer, Franz. Right now, it's not. But I can also tell you that as a group, we've heard the demand for adding profit share to our business provider policies. It's something that we're certainly looking at. And I'm going to recommend that you keep on watching our social media. Stay close to our life specialists, our financial advisors. And of course, there'll be an announcement. Something exciting will be announced pretty shortly. So yeah, just keep an eye out for that announcement, Franz. Tracy, are you seeing any other questions? We have to wrap up soon.
Yeah, Marlon, there's one more. Sajal Vallabha has asked, would financial underwriting not be applicable for calculating max cover on most business insurance?
Absolutely. That's a very good question. Thank you, Sajal. So, absolutely. So, insurance exists primarily to put the insured life in the position that they were immediately before the insured risk, before the insured event. So we're not in the business of enriching people. We want to put you in a position that you were previously, immediately before the insured event. So absolutely, every single insurance application, business provider application goes through a process of financial underwriting. And at PPS, the level or the depth at which we would follow with regards to that investigation is determined by the valuation of the business. So businesses with lower valuations typically up to this specific amount, I can't remember it offhand, but literally your financial advisor is able to do evaluation. There are tools that we provide. Alternatively, if you're using the services of specialist support services via your financial plan advisor or broker, we conduct what is called a business needs analysis, where we will come to a valuation that is based on 3 different methods. So firstly, the valuation that is given to us directly by the owner, and 9 to 10 times, that's the one we use. Or alternatively, there's 2 other methods that we use, and it's calculated by a piece of software that we use. Generally, up until a particular level, that in itself is sufficient evidence. But where we have firms with larger valuations, we will need not just the BNA or the valuation being done by the financial advisor or broker, but we'll also need, you need to ensure that the application is accompanied by audited financial statements. It's only with these audited financial statements that we'll be able to truly assess the risk that the application presents to us. So thanks, Sujal, for that question. I hope I answered it. Nick Olivier, here's another question. by Nicola Fear, and it's COVID-19 related. And this is a hot one because everybody's asking this question. And there's been like this mad sort of rush to get business interruption cover. So Nick wants to know, under COVID-19, is it covered with our existing business interruption cover? So there's two answers. So the first answer is our members, short-term insurance policy owners that own PPS commercial insurance, where they opted for specifically for business interruption cover. Yes, they are covered. They will continue to be covered. I think what has happened subsequent to that, all short-term insurers have reviewed their business interruption cover for new policy applications. And specifically, when we say new policy applications, we are looking at there is some kind of exception where we are excluding pandemics. And the reason for that is, in order to make the cover work and to provide cover for everybody under a pandemic type scenario, we'd significantly have to increase the premium to the point where it is totally unaffordable. So to answer your question, COVID cover exists for our existing policyholders, those who had it, who opted because it's an optional extra. All new applications, there'll be a pandemic exclusion, unfortunately. Guys, we've run out of time, and at this point in time, I'd like to say thank you to all of our speakers. A special word of thank you to our members that have joined us today. And I think in closing, we have to say that as a nation, I think SMMEs is not just critical for us to survive, but they're critical for us to thrive as well. And I mean, our government's intention is to ensure that roughly 90% of formal employment is generated by the SMME space. Now, some people might say it's a pipe dream. I differ. I mean, I honestly believe that SMMEs and the small business sector is indeed our silver bullet for economic transformation. SMEs are faced by many risks to not only the business itself, but the people who own them as well. Unfortunately, there's help at hand. There are specialists who can help in reducing or transferring risk to third parties. Speak to your financial advisor or broker if you'd like to book a consultation or to discuss your individual business assurance needs. Importantly as well, please join us next week when we discuss the need for holistic financial planning. And at PPS, we are not one of those when you die people. We're not too terribly concerned with when you die. Specifically at PPS Specialist Support Services, we're actually more concerned with your life right now, while you are alive, and how we can ensure that you live your best life. Our members have a multitude of needs, of priorities, and of course, limited resources. We'll be creating a discussion around how best to address those limited needs and resources with a plan. Of course, the webinar will be flighted a bit later on today. So I think, guys, just the last thing before we go, please look out for our webinar questionnaire. Please rate me, please rate Tracy, Tiffany, the quality of the session, the audio. We've got one or two other questions that we really need you to answer. Those questions are invaluable in making our sessions better. And please don't forget to register for next week's session. It's going to be super. Thank you once again for your time. Thank you for joining. Specifically, a special word of thanks once again for our members that joined us. Please stay safe, stay blessed, and see you all next time. Thank you and bye-bye.